Okay, thank you. Okay, well, welcome to Communities Committee. Number 1, apologies, please, Andrew.
Councillor Proctor, substitute is Councillor Brown. I'm not sure if Councillor Braze is there or Councillor Davey.
Councillor Davey has messaged me to have his apologies put in.
Right, that's fine. Thank you.
He told me to let the community, the committee's team.
Thank you.
I'm present, Andrew. Councillor Braze is here.
Okay, there we go.
Councillor Braze, that's great, thanks. Is Councillor MacDonald and Councillor Sturrock around? No.
Yes, I'm here. Councillor MacDonald's here.
Councillor MacDonald's here, great.
Okay, brilliant.
Councillor Sturrock? No. Sorry, convener.
No, that's okay. Brilliant. Okay, well, we'll move on to number 2, which is declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest today? Sorry, Councillor Moore, you're first.
Thank you, convener. Yes, I'm declaring a non-financial interest in item 7, report 35421. While we were on the site visit, I gave procedural advice to some of the people who were there, but it was not in the presence of an officer, and therefore to ensure the probity of any decision, I will withdraw for that item.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? No. Okay, we move on to number 3, minutes. 3.1 Communities Committee minutes. Submit for approval as a correct record. Councillor Speed.
Yeah. Thanks, convener. Sorry, just on that, in terms of agenda item 7, I was on the site visit at Wetherspoons along with yourselves and officers, and was aware, obviously, of people approaching us on that visit. However, do not feel that I've any interest to declare other than an acknowledgement that they were there and were asking some councillors some questions, but don't feel that I give any opinion, and will remain in the meeting.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. As you know, it's for each individual councillor to determine themselves whether they have a declaration of interest. But thank you, Councillor Speed. So if we go back to 3.1, the minutes of the last meeting, is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. And 3.2, Arbroath Harbour Joint Consultative Committee. Submit for noting. Is that noted?
Noted.
Noted.
If we then move on to item 4, which is on page 13, which is an information report on the private sector housing grants. Is there any question on this report? Councillor Devine.
Thanks, convener. On page 14, mention under number 1, mention is made of occupational therapists. I just really wanted to ask, is anything being done to increase the number of occupational therapists? Because I'm certainly, and I'm sure others of you are too, getting people coming forward for housing, waiting a very long time for an occupational therapist to assess them. And this is, of course, curtailing their ability to get any priority on the housing list. Can anybody give me any idea about that, please?
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Do you have an officer present who's able to answer that question?
I'm here, Lee Tom, Building Standards.
Yeah, on you go. Sorry, Lee.
That's okay. No problem. I can't really answer that one fully because it's not within my remit, but we do provide funding for one occupational therapist to assess needs for only for major adaptations for private sector. It would have to be through the partnership to answer that one, I would assume.
Okay, maybe Andrew, can you take a note? Yeah, Mr. Armstrong's come in, so I'll get Mr. Armstrong to.
Thank you, convener. Probably just going to say exactly what you were going to say to the committee clerk, that we will take a note of that and refer it to the Health and Social Care Partnership and get a note out to committee members.
Yeah, that's exactly, must have read my mind. That's exactly what I was about to say. So we'll move to, thank you.
That's great. I mean, I do recognise that this is private housing, but the whole thing about OT assessment is quite a big one. So I would appreciate some information on that. Thank you.
Yeah, you appreciate that's IJB, so we'll get an answer from them. Thank you. Councillor Moore, I think you're next.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, on page 15, I'm just slightly confused because in table 2, the additional from adult services is 128,000, and in table 3, it's 105,000. I don't understand the difference.
Okay, well, let's get an officer to answer that. So who would like to take on Councillor Moore's question?
Can I take that one on again?
You can, Lee, when you got.
Right. Yeah, it is quite complicated actually. Just for clarity, table 2 is a summary position which outlines the budget available to spend. We've noted the additional 128,000, which is a one-off amount from adult services. Part of these monies was actually to fund an interim contract for the care and repair service when Angus Care and Repair ceased business. That cost actually equated to 23,000, which is noted on the next page in table 4 under revenue budget monitoring. Therefore, the remainder of the 128,000 after paying the interim service equates to 105,000, which was approved to be used for the backlog of grant applications. It's this 105,000 which is shown in table 3 there. And as of the 30th of September, just over 12,500 was approved from this 105 which was left. Sorry, there's a lot of numbers there, but hopefully you followed that one.
Okay, Councillor Moore, does that give you an explanation?
Yes, thank you.
Good. Okay, it does all make sense. Okay, Councillor Speed, I think you're next.
Yeah, thank you. I also echo Councillor Devine's comments and concerns with regards to kind of OT wait times for assessment and the impact that that has on their application going live. And so just on that, I just wanted to ask, what is being done to kind of monitor and kind of measure the wait time, you know, the impact on people's lives that are waiting for an adaptation? You know, because many may be living in really quite challenging circumstances if their home environment isn't right and they're not managing to access kind of basic kind of showering facilities or access in and out of their home, etc. So I just wondered what was done to ensure that, you know, their kind of their health and well-being is being kind of looked after during those wait times.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Speed. Who would like to take that question on? If it's external, we'll just contact the relevant department to provide an answer. So do we think that this is another IJB one?
That certainly would be my understanding, Convener. So we'll make a note of that. I noticed Mr. Morrow wanted to come in, but maybe just to make the same point.
Yeah, as obviously Councillor Speed, you're on the board of the IJB, so that's something you can take up yourself, but hopefully for the rest of the committee we can get an answer sent out to the rest of the committee. Okay, Councillor Stewart, you're next.
Yeah, if it possibly helps Councillor Speed with an I've had a case similar to this in Montrose, and the answer I got was that they are looking to piggyback on the back of the like bathroom contracts that's getting done, replacement bathrooms. They're just going to include it onto that at the time, you know, if there's things that come up, because they obviously do have a bit of a backlog with OT just now.
Thank you.
If I can just come back, Councillor Salmon, it was more with regards to what has been done to kind of check in and make sure that you know, the impact wasn't as such that it was impacting on their quality of life and their mental health and well-being.
I think it's been indicated, Councillor Speed, that this has to come from an outside body, which we will arrange, or the committee clerk will arrange to be done and circulated to all members. But as I pointed out, you can raise that directly as you're a board member of the IJB.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Salmon.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. Okay, this is not for deciding on the support, so If there's nobody else, we'll move on to 4.2, Schedule 1, Winter Roads Service Review. Any question? How I find it? Councillor Speed again? Oh, no. Was that
Sorry, no.
No, it's okay. Don't worry. No problem. Right. Anybody got questions on this information report on? No. Okay. Well, if we don't, we'll move on to the next one, which is Public Transport Services Review. Any questions on that one? No. 3, Schedule 3, Impact on Angus of the Dundee Low Emission Zone. I'm going to query about that, so the public will know a little bit more about it. Any questions on that one? No. Okay. Schedule 4 is the introduction of Scotland-wide free bus travel for under 22s. Any questions, Councillor Muir?
Thank you, convener. Yes, it's a very interesting reading. It looks forward considerably. The only question I've got is, with the COVID restrictions we have now, how well can this be implemented? How full a service can be provided? Has that been looked at and discussed with the public transport companies?
Okay, Mr. Cochrane and Mr. Scott, I think would be the Mr. Cochrane.
Thank you, convener. Thank you, Councillor Moore. This report is really just trying to inform members about the under 22s free bus travel that is coming forward. So we haven't raised anything in here around the COVID restrictions. Bus transport in Angus, in terms of school bus transport, has been ongoing since August last year. And as far as I know, the majority of public transport timed buses are also now back to their normal timetable. So I'm not sure if Councillor Moore has something specific. I'm happy to pick up that offline if he wishes.
Okay, there we go. There's an offer for you, Councillor Muir, to have a chat.
I'll take it up. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else got any questions on this information report? Councillor Brace?
Well, it was really more of a comment, if I may.
Well, a very short comment.
A very short comment. In order for under 22s to access free Scotland-wide bus travel, they've got to be able to find the bus service, and that's the bit that's lacking at the moment. And we've got a whole lot of work to do about that. Thank you.
Yes, we do, and we're both on the MOG that's looking at that, as long with Councillor Speed, who's about to speak next. Councillor Speed?
Sorry, convener, just to let you know, I'm having real difficulty with my hand function and my mic function.
All right.
It just seems to be quite a delay, so yeah, so apologies. Yeah, it was really just kind of, I think most, if not all of us, were on a meeting of Angus Council where there was a deputation given by one of the NHS representatives. And for me, some of the kind of statistics within that presentation in terms of carbon emissions and the impact on people's health, as well as kind of the death rate within Scotland and Angus, was really, really quite kind of hard hitting. And I just wondered if we were doing enough to kind of send out those messages. We do a lot in terms of raising awareness around kind of littering and waste and the impact on the environment. But as we know, the carbon emissions are kind of a kind of unseen kind of damage. And I just wondered whether we need to kind of have more communications around that to raise awareness, to help in our encouragement of people to think about using alternative methods of travel.
Okay, thank you. As you know, this is an information report letting the council know of this introduction by the Scottish Government. It's a Scottish Government initiative.
Yeah, I just meant locally, whether...
Yeah, I don't think that's relevant for today. This is an information report. You're on the road safety MOG along with myself, so it's probably the appropriate place to be raising that. Anybody else? No. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to number 5, which is on page 133, Strategic Housing Investment Plan, better known as the SHIP. Anybody have any questions on that? Is that an old hand, Councillor Speed, or? We'll go Councillor Devine, just in case Councillor Speed's hand's stuck. Councillor Devine.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Page 140, 5.2. I just, well, 5.1 and 5.2 really. I really do appreciate the work being done to avoid homelessness. I think I think housing officers are doing a great job there, and that is to be commended. But I'm still not clear how we have the houses available for homeless people to be able to move into straight away. We don't want them to go into bed and breakfast. We don't want them to be going into temporary accommodation. So do we have a kind of pot of houses that they can use, or do we just kind of hope that there are voids in different places that they can be put into? It would be helpful too if somebody could outline how the 430,000 Scottish Government money was used in the last 2 years, and any plans that there are for this year's 144,000. Maybe quite a lot of that's been used because we're quite far through the year, but if we could get some idea of that, it just seems to me that we're getting these figures, but I don't know how they've been used particularly.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Devine. Mr. Morrow, would you like to take that, or one of your team?
Yeah, thanks, convener. Thanks, councillor. Yeah, you're referring to the Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan and the way that we spend the money. Can I provide the figures to you after the committee, if that's okay? We do have that broken down in terms of our action plan around the Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan, and that articulates how we've used the funding. Just going back to your first point around how we use the stock for temporary accommodation and permanent accommodation for homeless people, we do have a stock of, as we call them, dispersed properties. That's temporary accommodation that's dispersed through the mainstream stock, so that they're the same essentially as all the rest of the stock, and they're dotted about amongst that stock. We have those available so that we don't have to utilise bed and breakfast. Through the pandemic, we did have a number of people staying in bed and breakfast for short periods, including some families, because of the backlog of voids caused by the pandemic. But now we're back to the normal situation where certainly no families in bed and breakfast, but the very occasional one when the temporary stock is full. We have over 100 dispersed properties for temporary accommodation, and by its nature, it's a holding stage so that people can stay there before we identify permanent accommodation that meets their needs, and there's a process for that, as you know, and it does mean that some people get moved through the temporary accommodation quicker than others, and some people stay a bit longer. One of the processes that we've introduced recently is, as we call it, flipping. We actually change the temporary accommodation that people are in to permanent if that accommodation needs for the long term. So that's a much quicker way of making the transition between temporary and permanent, and helps the householders themselves, because obviously that's one less move they have to make. The temporary accommodation we use as well is not just our own housing associations take part in that provision. Does that answer your question?
Well, it does, except that I was hoping, and I think the idea is that people should be moved into permanent housing straight away. I can understand the need for it, but I thought we were trying to move away from the temporariness of that, especially when it's families, because that is just disruption. It could well be school disruption as well. So I'm just hoping that we are trying to move towards having a bank of permanent housing available for homeless people. Thank you.
We don't hold permanent accommodation, especially for homeless people. What we do is identify any accommodation to meet their needs. Where we can, certainly move people straight into permanent accommodation, but having an availability of stock that meets particular needs in a particular area is quite challenging. But you're quite right. What we are doing in the Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan articulates this. The objective is to reduce the amount of temporary accommodation, and certainly we have done that and are doing that. So that over time, as you say, that stock is reduced, and by reducing that, obviously what that does is it increases the amount of permanent accommodation because we're working with a finite resource. So over the next 4 years or so, we should reduce the temporary accommodation down below 100 units, and as you say, increasingly allocate or help people into production more quickly without having to go to that temporary stage.
No, thank you, Mr. Morrow. I can see there are huge challenges there, but I just wanted to be assured that we're going in the right direction. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Morrow, can you circulate that information to all members of the committee, please, that you spoke about at the start with? Thank you. Councillor Duff, next, please.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Yeah, my question relates to page 15152, a very useful table. Thanks for that. Really, just a couple of projects that I've got a question mark. The two that I've on page 2, I think page 152, the Strathmartin Hospital and Paytons Lane, Montrose, slightly parochial one. When is the anticipated start date of those two projects? It certainly would be good if Strathmartin Hospital was starting. I see that we've got a £500,000 committed grant for that one. Do we have any idea when either will start?
Mr. Morrow, can you help here, please?
The Strathmartin Hospital, I believe, is starting in 2022-23, but I don't have an exact date. But I can see if I can get more information on that for you, Councillor.
I think the other question was the
similar question on Paytons Lane. Thanks for the answer on Strathmartin.
Yeah, and I think that it's a similar situation with Paytons Lane, although I'm not quite clear on the programme for that one. We've got some funding in against it for 22-23, but I'm not sure if we've got the exact length of the programme. So again, what I'll do is I'll find out more information on that, Councillor, and get that to you as soon as possible after the committee meeting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Cheap, excuse me, you're next.
Thanks, convener. Yes, again, it's probably for Mr. Morrow, and like Councillor Duff, I'm focusing on page 151-152. It might be quite useful. It's part of Appendix 1, but I'm looking at this and wondering what it really means, to be frank, because there's not much detail to it, and some of the headings don't match the labels, so I'm not sure what they all are. But my question really, if you don't mind, convener, I would direct it at Mr. Morrow. Just there are one or two items on here for my own locality, Mr. Morrow, that I don't know anything about. There, for example, on page 151, the third line from the bottom, Westfield Phase 3 is showing 15 properties at a cost of £1 million over 23, 24, 24, 25. I don't even know anything about that. Is that firstly, is that a new development I'm not aware of out at Westfield, and the other one is really, I see they put Skelly, we know when that's happening. They also had figures in there for Panbride, and I don't know what that's about either, knowing that, bearing in mind that there's not any planning permission being given for anything at Panbride yet. So is this something new? I'm just not sure what this is telling me.
Okay, Mr. Morrow, can you help here, please?
Yeah, Councillor, the projects that we show in the SHIP are those ones that we've discussed with our Scottish Government colleagues, the housing associations, and the projects that you identify there are housing association projects. What we have to do is we have to plan ahead, because what the Scottish Government asks us to do is have contingency plans for projects to ensure that we're utilising all of the grant resource and have projects that actually utilise potentially more of the funding. And that does include some projects sometimes that don't yet have planning permission. There's quite a number of projects here that don't have planning. So some of the projects are at an early stage and some are at a more advanced stage. Again, if you're wanting more detail on those housing association projects, I can ask for that from our RSL colleagues and get that to you afterwards.
It would be useful because obviously there's a big demand for housing here as well. If we can tell people in advance that there are plans for development at each of these locations and the numbers of units, it will give people a bit of hope, I'd like to think.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Morrow. Councillor Duff, is that a new hand or is that a... Sorry.
Sorry, a legacy
No,
one.
no, don't worry, it's not a problem. Okay, anybody else?
Yeah.
No, any comments?
Sorry.
Councillor Speed, is it a question or a comment?
Well, yeah, I couldn't get my hand back up. It was a question, but I didn't get my mic off quick enough.
No, we've just.
Yeah, I do have concerns, like Councillor Devine was kind of explaining with regards to homelessness and just our availability of stock to support, as was said, people move on from temp accommodation, as well as the number of families that are living in kind of overcrowded situations and their wait times. So yeah, I guess in terms of the kind of projections, in terms of increasing our stock, within the plan, I just wondered how much was taken into consideration around the shift and changes with the Health and Social Care Partnership and people, not going into care homes and choosing to stay at home, and that's obviously accelerated throughout the pandemic. So I just wondered if the report has taken in that kind of shift, and also I've kind of previously been in board meetings with regards to children's services where, again, there's been a kind of quite stark increase in children and young people with a physical kind of condition or health need, and those numbers are increasing. So I just wondered how that kind of matches together. And I also wanted to ask with regards to buying off the open market, what the kind of updates were with regards to that and how many councils have homes have been bought this year, if any.
Tomorrow, I think we have, so that should be some good news. On you go.
Yeah, probably. I suppose in the first questions that you've got, Councillor, the SHIP does or is flexible in terms of changing to meet the current demands and the current needs of people, and in that way it follows the local housing strategy, because the SHIP is the delivery mechanism for the local housing strategy. So in that way it does reflect the need and demand assessment, the latest one we have on that. So the projects in the SHIP have a range of types and sizes. So there'll be a number of one-bed properties, for instance, to meet the needs of single households, but clearly we need a more diverse stock than that. So that's why a number of the projects have a mixture of 2, 3 and 4-bed houses as well in some cases. We try and spread that across all areas to meet the identified needs and demand. We are clearly limited by the resources we have, both from the Scottish Government and from our housing association partners and in our own capital programme. But the SHIP does identify over the next 5-year period 775 units to be delivered, so that's a quite substantial increase in the affordable housing available over that period. In terms of the last question, buying properties off the market, we have an open market acquisition scheme, as you know, in which we buy properties that are advertised on the market and meet some identified needs. Sometimes, again, that can be a 1 or a 2-bed flat, which means by buying it back, we get, say, a complete ownership of a 4 in a block, whereas previously one of those would have been owned, and that sometimes gives us difficulties in achieving secure door entry systems and external insulation and so on. So that is a direction of travel that we're interested in pursuing more. We also use the open market acquisition scheme to meet the needs of particular families which we find difficult from either the new build programme or from within the existing stock, and that's a very useful mechanism for bringing properties into the stock that meet the needs of a family, and that might mean that we have to buy them and then make some changes to them in terms of adapting them for a particular family's needs. So we certainly use that mechanism. We also buy products off the shelf, as we call it, properties that have already been built by developers, for instance, and are marketing those. And certainly there have been some instances where we've done that, and we're actively doing that at the moment in a number of sites. So it's we have a number of approaches to try and make sure that the properties we have in the stock meet that sort of diverse range of needs that you're quite right that you've identified.
Okay, thank you. That's been helpful, Mr. Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow.
Okay, I think we're moving to comments. If any colleagues have got any comments they'd like to make. No comments. But if we move, is this report agreed then? Yes, okay.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Well, so if we move to page 163, which is the Housing Capital Monitoring Report 21-22. I shall get there eventually. Any questions on this one? Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I mean, it's a topic that we have discussed before, but it's covered in page 165, the issues with heating and gas replacing electricity at the moment. And I'm conscious I'm not dismissing issues which are considerable, plus the financial issues and the change of the change in the gas price. I'm just conscious, like many members, I have people who've come to me asking what's happening, that they're waiting for their house to be upgraded, and I guess just a concern that are we any closer to sort of coming to definite conclusions, and really a reassurance that we've let people know the reason for the delay, which is that there's a bit of a halt in doing anything at the moment. And clearly I know I've had one or two constituents who are unhappy about the delay and just wanting some reassurance that they've been told that there is a delay, and etc.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Take that one, or one of your team.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I mean, you're quite right. It is a concern. There's a number of challenges at the moment around heating installation, not least the fallout from the increase in the fuel prices, and that, as we've described in the report, is giving us issues around meter installations. And as you know, the utility companies at the moment are fairly reticent about taking on new customers, and that's affecting the metering side of the programme. And that's one of the causes of the delays. We're also suffering the consequences of the global supply issues, and certainly that's affecting heating, both gas and electric heating upgrades. Electric, especially, actually, the delivery time now on storage and panel heaters and so on is very long. And one of the other issues that's affecting a number of our programs is the ability of contractors to retain staff. And again, these are national and international issues. We are making sure that tenants, we're doing our best to keep tenants informed, and we do appreciate their patience, obviously, as we try and work through these issues.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Morrow. I think you're next.
Thanks, convener. Number 6, just at the bottom under miscellaneous. It's regarding the installation programme for the smoke alarms. Obviously, it's saying here that we've only engagement is below 40%, and we're obviously struggling to get tenants to engage with us regarding this. So obviously, as it's mandatory, how are we going to go about gaining entry into these houses? I mean, given it, I think it's February. Is there any? Have we heard anything from the Scottish Government if they're going to extend this period or not, or is that the deadline in February for that?
Okay, Mr. Morrow, do you want to take that one as well, please?
Yeah, the last bit first. We've not heard of any potential extension from the Scottish Government. They did delay the date for installation by a year because of the issues with the pandemic. But it's possible that they might be flexible in terms of meeting that date, because, as you know, Councillor, the legislation requiring installation of an extended smoke alarm system affects all tenures. It's not just social housing. So that is a challenge, I think, to many homeowners and landlords as well as ourselves. In terms of the programme itself and how we get tenants to allow entry, I think, as we've described in the report there, there may well be a perception from tenants that they're not getting anything more than they have already because they already have a smoke detector system, and this is obviously extending it to more areas. What we may have to do, because it is mandatory for us to meet this, is to use a forced access process, the same as we use for servicing the gas boilers. So obviously we'd like to go down the discussion stage and getting tenants to volunteer access. But if it looks increasingly like we have to use the forced access, we will have to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Duff, is that just an old hand you've got up? Or did... Yep, so if we move to Councillor Fotheringham.
Thank you, Convener. It's a similar question, Convener, to Councillor Duff's actually. And Mr Morrow, it's at the top of page 166, the bathroom replacement programme. Now, I'm pleased, obviously, in current circumstances, and as a former building surveyor, I know exactly what materials and things are like. And I'm really pleased to see that the progress is in line with the projected spend, but also pleased to see that you're having regular meetings with the contractors. Is there any sign that the labour situation is going to improve so that, you know, that the programmes obviously can be accelerated? Because I do realise during this sort of last year, there's not been a lot of bathroom installations, and I have had several constituents on the phone to me about that. Thank you.
Mr Morrow.
No is probably the answer, unfortunately.
I thought that's what you were going to say.
Yeah. We are doing our best, and to give them their due, the contractors are doing their best as well. It is a very challenging labour market at the moment, and we are doing an options appraisal at the moment, looking at the best way of how to go forward. Because, as you know, the bathroom replacement programme particularly is a long-term thing, and as you say, quite a few tenants are still awaiting their installation. So there doesn't seem to be any sign of the labour market improving anytime soon. And again, these things are issues that are being experienced across the country. We just received a report this morning from the Excel framework, in which we do a lot of identifying both labour shortages and material supply problems across a range of sectors, including construction. But as I say, we are having ongoing discussions with all of the contractors to try and improve the situation and help them with their situation as much as we can.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Muir.
Yes, thank you, Convener. Mr Morrow, I recall that when the mandatory smoke alarms and heat detectors and carbon monoxide alarm systems were brought in, it was said it would cost the average family about £220 to have them all fitted. Are we finding that that is a sort of cost in our premises, or is there a significant increase or decrease from that price?
Mr Morrow, is that an answer that you can give at the moment, or would you need to go and get some information?
If it's okay with you, I might ask my colleague Andrea Wilson, who I think is on the call, just to... Oh, so I see Ian Cochrane. Mr Cochrane has his hand up, so maybe he's got that information.
I don't particularly have that information, Convener, but my recollection of what I've read recently is that 220 was if you were doing it yourself. I think if you were having them professionally fitted, I think it was considerably more. So I certainly wouldn't be looking at a budget of 220 for property, but Andrea has indeed come in, so maybe she has the facts and figures.
The 220 figure that we hear is based around interconnected through wireless connection, and with one being battery operated and one being hardwired. The Angus Council specification, and we've done extensive checking across other local authorities and housing associations in Scotland, is that we do all units hardwired, unless there is a very specific circumstance where we can't achieve that. So we effectively install our LD2 to a new build standard, or as close to as possible. So it is costing more. However, as a landlord and the manager of the assets, it makes good sense in the long term.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cheap.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. This is just really for information, but out in the market, I've just done some properties recently, and the through a properly qualified electrician, and it's averaging about £350 to £400 per property. So to answer whoever was asking it before, that tends to be the price that I've done just on a very small sample, just to give everybody an idea.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Anybody? Oh, Mr. Morrow, is that a new hand?
Yes, it is, convener. If you'll indulge me to say it.
Yeah, of course.
One of the things I think that we are seeing is that clearly, as I said, that this legislation applies to all tenures and not just social housing stock. And I appreciate for people that own their own homes or landlords of properties that might be problematic in identifying electricians that have the resource and availability of skilled staff to undertake the work. If people are interested in that, could I draw their attention to our Trusted Trader scheme, which was in the previous report in the SHIP. What the Trusted Trader scheme does is it provides the contact details of trades who have come through the scheme to give a level of assurance to people in terms of the quality and response of those contractors, and that might be a starting point for owners that otherwise wouldn't necessarily know which contractor to go to. So it's really just touting the business for that Trusted Trader scheme.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moore. That's an important piece of information. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Any comments? Councillor Devine?
Yes, thanks, convener. While I recognise that garages are kind of quite low priority in the scheme of things because there's so many important things in housing to be done, I am really pleased to see under miscellaneous on page 166 that we're going to demolish a fair number of really awful looking garages which are on our land but have been built by other people, and some of them are disgusting and just are they're like dens actually. So I am delighted to see that these are going to be done, and quite quickly as well. I'm sure they all won't be done. They all won't be done, but I'll be glad to see some of them away. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other colleague would like to make a comment? No. Okay. If we go back to the recommendations, then are the recommendations agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Thank you. If we go to number 7, which is the application for a consent to chairs on a public road at the Corn Exchange Marketplace, Arbroath, and we paused this at the last meeting for a site visit, which
I need to withdraw from this,
my
convener.
apologies. Yeah, Councillor Moore, how does that happen?
Can IT put me back in the waiting room or whatever?
Okay, well, IT either.
Convener, sorry, it's Sarah. Councillor Moore, you'll actually have to leave the meeting, and I will send you a Teams message asking you to come back when the committee have made their decision.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Right, Councillor Brown, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I was not at the visit. Does that mean I can't take part in the?
Let me just seek some guidance from the committee staff. I don't think that should be an issue, but I'll leave it to our professional committee staff to give us some advice.
Sorry, convener, I'm trying to get my show on.
It's okay, Mr. Wilson.
Convener, I think that's okay for the councillor to take part.
Okay, there we go, Mr. Councillor Brown. You're okay?
Thank you.
Okay, so sorry, back to where I was. Yeah, we had a site visit. We paused it at the last meeting for a site visit, and if I remember right, at the last meeting, one of the committee members was going to be bringing a proposal forward. I don't know if that still is going to happen. So, first of all, do we have any questions? Councillor Speed.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I just wondered if officers had managed to find out what was going to be done to address the issues within the proposals and where they're kind of cited in terms of the additional tables and chairs. It did look like they would be kind of blocking off a crucial access door that allows people with kind of disabilities, wheelchair users, prams, buggies, etc., to get up onto the kind of area of the inside of the establishment. So I just wondered if there had been any kind of follow-up conversations with regards to that, because it does look like that they would be blocking off that access.
Thank you, Councillor Speed. Do we have an answer from an officer on that who may know what the points that Councillor Speed are raising? Mr. Cochrane.
Thanks, convener. Unfortunately, I wasn't at the site visit, and I think this question arose at the last meeting. I think the plan on page 184 shows that there isn't an access into the building at that point, and I think the door was potentially down to the beer cellar. But I do see Mr. Scott has also joined, so
Thank you.
Yes, he was on site.
Mr. Scott was on the site visit, so he, I think, hopefully give a more informed answer.
Yeah, through you, convener. Yeah, thanks. There is a door there. It may well be serving the cellar another purpose, but it is marked as being a disabled access to the building. If the committee were minded to authorise the placing the tables and chairs, it would be something that we identify with Wetherspoons at that stage, the applicant in that stage, to ensure that there's alternative provision for that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Speed.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. Any comments? Where are we? Councillor Durno.
I just wondered if they needed to have the chairs, because invisible people don't need to sit down.
Okay, maybe that would be helpful if you just expanded a little bit on what you mean for people who...
Well, the invisible people that are sitting on the tables and chairs, you know, they don't actually need the chairs because they don't sit down. Just a point. What's the point?
Well, I think I'm more confused than I was before you started speaking, but we'll move on. So sorry, let's go to Councillor Speed, I think, is next.
Yep, thanks, convener. I want to do all I can to support local businesses and to kind of stimulate our local economy, especially after the hard times that businesses have had. However, I am really concerned about agreeing to this additional request for extending their outdoor seating area. Because I just feel that we do need to consider other businesses in the area, and most importantly, kind of pedestrian access and accessibility. I know that the kind of plans show that there would still be a passageway through that area. However, it would be quite restrictive. We kind of don't know how the Wetherspoons would go about addressing the kind of access issues to that crucial door that takes people with mobility difficulties up into the inside. I just think that we cannot have that being blocked off. So that would probably displace the seating that they're proposing. They would have to come up with another plan. So yeah, I'm not supportive of increasing it. I think there would need to be a real need there. I'm not sure that there's enough evidence that the seating that is outside is being fully utilised at the moment. But yeah, my concerns are around the impact on pedestrian access, especially when we are promoting active travel. And I do have a number of constituents who contact me with access issues that they have whilst on the local high street, whilst trying to get around and having to come over, overcome obstacles such as kind of street furniture and clutter that's already there. I just feel that we would be adding to that kind of clutter on that street. So yeah, I'm not supportive of agreeing.
Okay,
thank
so
you.
That's an Arbroath member. So are you moving that then, Councillor Speed, as an Arbroath member?
Yeah, I'm happy to move that.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go to, well, maybe we better see if there's a seconder first. Is there a seconder for Councillor Speed?
Councillor Durno.
Councillor Durno.
I'll second Councillor Speed.
Thank you. So I think if you go to Councillor Stewart, you were next.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Yeah, I just think, you know, in the last year we've seen a right influx of licensed premises looking to expand their premises outside, and you know, if we ended up with all businesses wanting to expand outside, while I'm supportive of helping businesses, you know, I mean, I just feel that we have a culture now where you know, if we've got that, they're coming outside, and sometimes that can cause a bit of antisocial issues. And while that's down to the publican to address that, sometimes they're not always on hand because they're busy in the pub or whatever. So I just do have concerns about that. And on the visit there, I actually felt that they had enough provision of outside tables there already. That was my take on it. But I'm not an Arbroath councillor, you know, and it's not affecting my constituents in Montrose, but we're here to look at the whole of Angus. So, you know, that's my take on it. I don't feel I could support that.
Excuse me. Thank you. Councillor Brace.
Well, just I suppose echoing what others have said so far, and also, well, we've already given, I think, 2 areas of public property to the public house concerned here. I've been down various times and it's never ever been anything like fully utilised. There's only ever been a handful of people using it. And my big concern, or one of my many concerns about this, is that if we give this other bit to this particular business, it means that nobody else is going to have access to maybe start up some other entrepreneurial business venture on that ground. We can't give it to anyone else, in other words. And since they're not using what we've already given them, I see no reason at all to grant them any more of what is public property, and also which we're not, the council taxpayer is getting nothing for in return.
Thank you, Councillor Brace. Councillor Cheap, you're next.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I was about to say I concur with Councillor Speed and actually Councillor Stewart on this one for all the reasons they've said. But I think when we were at the site on the day, I was of the mind, you know, this, I heard what people were saying, but it didn't seem an awful lot an imposition to me. But I went back again, and yeah, it was quiet, and that is a narrow part of the entranceway to Marketplace, and it can be, if it was being used for seating, or sometimes not even seating, people just hanging about with pints in their hands and things there and standing around. That can be quite overbearing for people coming through there. I know, as Councillor Brace says, that's a duty for the licence holder, but it is a concern. That would be a concern for me in the narrowness there. It's further up. It's a bit wider. Also, again, what Councillor Brace just said, yes, it's right. I know it's not for now, but why are we giving out extra space and getting nothing for it in that case? I don't understand why we're not getting rent for public space being used here, all for businesses, certainly, but in this case, I think it's a step too far, so I would be agreeing with the motion if that's the case. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Brace, is that just a legacy hand you've got? Thank you. Councillor Fotheringham.
Thank you, convener. Yes, just to, as Councillor Cheap said, use the word that the Provost used quite often, to concur. Yes, I'm agreeing with the Arbroath members. I think, as chair of the licensing board, this has come up twice before. I think they've got enough space. It's not used. I wasn't at the site visit, but I have seen it. It's not utilised, and I certainly will not support any extension to the area that they've already got. Thank you, convener.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody who would like to propose an alternative to Councillor Speed and Councillor Durnow's proposal? No. Can I just check with, I'll call them first names, Andrew and Sarah here, that the wording put forward by Councillor Speed, seconded by Councillor Durnow, is acceptable to deal with this decision? Does it need to have anything specific in the wording?
Sarah, could I defer to your licensing expertise in this one, please? I think may well need additional wording, convener, just to see what the committee wants to do.
Convener, if I could just come in, essentially the report is asking the members to determine to either authorise the placing of the tables and chairs in the additional area subject to conditions, or simply to refuse the application. So I think in the absence of any other legal comment from Alison Watson, I would simply suggest that members are agreeing to refuse the application.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So that's agreed then, because there's no alternative proposal. Okay, thank you very much. I can be worded accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if we move on now to number 8.
Convener, sorry to interrupt.
Sorry.
Could I just ask you to hold on until I ask Councillor Moore to rejoin the meeting, please?
Apologies, thanks very much.
Okay.
Let me get my place, so that's helpful.
Apologies, convener. I'll just give Councillor Moore a call.
Okay, on you go.
Why bother? I'm here.
Oh, it's here. Fantastic.
Perfect.
Right. Right. We're on agenda item number 8, Councillor Moore. Okay, page 193. So it's amendments to the existing speed limits as on the title. Is there any questions on this? No, I'm sure there's going to be comments when we get to that stage, but yeah, there we go. Councillor Braze, is yours a comment or a question?
It is a comment.
Yeah, I think we'll go to comments. I didn't see anybody indicating questions, so fire away.
Well, just to say that I'm really delighted to see this change for Aberlemno. I've had a lot of complaints from people in the village there over all the years that I've been a councillor, and I'm glad that this is coming forward now. It's not going to entirely solve the problem. I think everyone's aware of that, but it's at least going to try and do something to help.
Okay, thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yeah, this is very welcome in the case of Barry and Carnoustie. It's been something that I've been asking for, but on behalf of locals who have been quite vocal about this, in our case where the A930, I think it is, leading from Moneyfeith along to Carnoustie is basically it's a 60 mile per hour, and people invariably go faster than that. So the real concern here has been at the junction with Station Road that leads down to Barry Station for visibility displays there. There have been accidents in the past, been a death there in the past, admittedly some time ago now. And so I'm delighted to see this is coming forward. It was a bit of a surprise to get in the paper because I thought I might have known before it was coming, but I'm delighted to see it. I do have a question though. I did ask Craig Hudson that whereabouts will the 40 mile per hour speed reduction signs be placed? And I've just had an email saying there'll be 130 metres west of the junction. Now, if the junction going into Barry, down to Barry Station, 130 metres dropping from 60 miles per hour down to 40 miles per hour, you will hit the junction entrance doing 60 miles per hour for that by that 100 metres. So I would have liked to see the reduction in speed signs much further back than that. Certainly at least 200, 300 metres from the junction to warn them that there's a reason why we're going down to 40 miles an hour here, and that it's in place before you actually hit the approach to the junction. Now, I don't know if there's a legal particular legal limit to this, but there's a common sense side to this, surely, that says to people to slow down, and there's reason for slowing down. So while I absolutely welcome this reduction, and there are other parts in our town we need it as well, particularly in Arbroath Road, but could I just ask, I see Mr. Scott's here, and Walter, is it possible that we could get that distance extended from 130 metres a bit further distance westward, please?
Mr. Scott, would you like to address that question?
Yeah, through you, convener. The distance is a standard distance in terms of the sighting of that particular sign. Noting, Councillor Cheap, what you were saying there, it's the visibility of that 40 coming out of a 60 and the preparedness that by the time you reach that sign, you should be observing the new speed limit that is critical there. So the sighting of that does afford that sight line to be able to see the sign, and therefore it's incumbent on the driver of the vehicle to actually be within the speed limit by the time they get to that sign, as opposed to seeing it and then slowing down.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Speed, I think you're next.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, I'm fully supportive of the speed reductions on Seaton Road. I know that, you know, constituents have raised issues with regards to the speed in the past, as well as correspondence that I receive from many of my constituents within the new housing development. I think anything we can do to make our roads safer in that, you know, along that stretch and in that area, I certainly would welcome, and it would hopefully also encourage more kind of people to take up active travel. So yeah, supportive from an Arbroath point of view.
Okay, thank you. That's good. Everybody's happy. So can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Perfect, thank you. So number 9 is Arbroath Harbour when I get there. Okay, Port Marine Safety Code audit. Now, I notice Mr. Fleming is with us. I don't know if, as an officer, want to speak to this, or will we just move to questions? Is that why Mr. Fleming's here, to answer questions?
Convener, if I may introduce the report, and then if there is any specific questioning, Mr. Fleming is here to answer that.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Go, Mr. Scott, then.
Yes, just to reference, we'd had the previous report on the Marine Safety Management System and the Port Marine Safety Code to committee. We'd had the site visit from elected members, we'd had the training from the elected members, and this was very much the anticipated and promised report on the audit. The committee are asked to note the results of the audit. I would highlight there's 4 stages in terms of the outcomes of satisfactory, observation, non-compliance and not applicable. And in that respect, we had 2 non-compliances, 21 observations and 72 satisfactory components. So overall, we would feel that's a good report. The 2 non-compliances are items that we've identified actions, and we will be seeing those off, so we will be compliant with those in the short term. But in particular, there were 2 items of best practice identified, which is not necessarily something that we would have anticipated, but it is something that I would highlight to the members in respect of those 2 items, which was our success of 100% availability for our aids to navigation. Clearly, members would understand the importance of that, but also in terms of the Council's consistent and measurable commitment to providing safe and efficient marine operations at the harbour, and that has come about through, over the decades, a significant amount of investment to keep what is an historic harbour up to current standards. So I just wanted to provide that overview in terms of the importance of this particular report.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any questions on this report? Councillor Moore.
Thank you, convener. Saying it is an excellent report, well laid out, very readable, has a glossary. It should be a benchmark for reports. But there are 2 queries I have got. The first is on page 262, which refers to it is not known if Council Legal Services hold copies of the Arbroath Harbour Acts and Orders, and I'm just wondering if that has been clarified yet. And on page 270, we can go down to it. Under 6.5, emergency planning, it observes there's no specific port emergency plan. We just have the council emergency plan. And I would fully agree that we should have a specific emergency plan for the harbour and ask if that is going to be undertaken.
Who would like to take that, Mr. Scott?
The convener, I'll answer the second of those, and I'd maybe invite Mr. Fleming to come in on the first point to clarify on whether whether we're aware yet, whether we've been notified, whether the legal services hold the record. It is something we'll need to give attention to. The feeling in terms of the audit was that the corporate emergency response system was adequate and was appropriate for what we needed it to be. If there are areas for improvement in that respect and having something specific for the harbour, then we would do. Recognising that the emergency responses down to the harbour are invariably picked up through specific procedures within the management system. So it was just that whether we needed to have an additional report of that ilk that would be already just identifying in a different form what we already do. But we'll certainly take your suggestion on, Councillor Moore, and I'll have those discussions with the Harbour Master as to whether that's something that would improve what we're doing down at Arbroath Harbour. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just come back on that question, please, convener?
Mr. Murray, on you go.
Yeah. If we do not have a specific harbour-based emergency plan, are the harbour staff conversant with the council's emergency plan?
In terms of the areas of that plan that they need to be aware of, yes, they are. They are specific emergency situations that would relate to the harbour rather than the generalities that the council emergency plan would be dealing with a myriad of issues, as I'm sure you'll understand, Councillor Moore. So the areas that they need to be aware of and applying that and who to speak to and how to respond, yes, they are aware of them.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Braze, you're next.
Convener, if Mr. Fleming can maybe come in terms of the...
Yeah, sorry, there was one other point. Apologies. Yeah, on you go.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, I have a copy of all the acts here that are a requirement, and as one of the points that I'm dealing with from the audit report is just to clarify whether legal services do hold a copy as well. And I just need to scan the document if they don't and send it through to them to do, then that's fine. But that's just one of the action points I have to carry out, combined with the rest of them through the report. So to answer your question, Councillor Moore, it is all in hand.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Braze, you're on.
Yes, well, of course, I attended the duty holders training, and I've actually found it very interesting just learning a bit about how it all works. And then I attended with others the visit to the harbour, and a lot of questions were answered by the harbour master. Thank you very much. And well, you know, as a duty holder, I think it's the harbour master who basically has to see to this, make sure everything's done properly, and then our officers are I suppose overseeing him. I'm perfectly content now with all this. I do have a question though, and it's regarding one of the sort of compliances. We have to have an annual bathymetric survey done at a cost of £15,000. It does seem rather a lot of money to me to be paying out every year to survey the same bit of water, really, or the seabed under it. Is this a thing that the cost might come down as years go by because of technology, etc., or are we going to be lumbered with this cost forever and ever?
Mr. Scott, would you like to address that?
It is something that we will need to absorb in terms of the cost. We will be seeking a competitive tender to provide that. The £15,000 is very much an estimate based on our knowledge of the market for that. As I say, we'd be hoping to get it for cheaper than that. Whether we can then negotiate better terms to actually bring that cost down, because it will become an annual requirement. That might be something that we can look at in terms of the procurement plan that we put in place for that, Councillor Bray. So yes, it is a new thing in that regard, the bathymetric survey requirement. It was explicitly identified that we needed that, and therefore it was an overt demonstration that we as a Harbour Authority are taking our responsibility seriously by having that information available from that survey. It is a requirement on us, in which case we will honour that, and we'll seek to do that as economically as we can.
Could you maybe as a supplementary tell me if there are many people in this marketplace who are equipped to provide this service? Is it a competitive?
It is a competitive business in that regard. We certainly have relied over recent years on a lower level of bathymetric information that we get during the dredging operations. So there is a degree of complexity in terms of the accuracy of the surveys. But yes, it is a relatively competitive market based on our experience, and therefore, as I say, we would be hoping to seek the benefits from that.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Durno. I think you're next.
Yeah, thanks. Great report. And thanks for Bruce to come and tell us about it today, considering it's his day off. I just wanted to ask about the lighthouse. We've got it under specific duties and powers. The lighthouse had went out this week, and unfortunately I had to read on it on social media. We didn't really hear about it, so I just wondered, does the lighthouse actually come under our authority as well? That's one question. And also, will the report be going to the Harbour Committee and the next Harbour Committee? Because obviously we're not having another Harbour Committee till next year. Will the Harbour Committee get a copy of the document? Thank you.
Okay, who would like to take that?
In that regard, the only lights that we are responsible for are those aids to navigation, which are on the shore. So the lighthouse is not our responsibility in that respect. And yes, in terms of reporting the audit results, we will take that through the Joint Consultative Committee, Councillor Durno, and we'll be able to have a discussion on that, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Fleming, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, it was just to follow up on Mr. Scott there. The Bellrock Lighthouse light has been out, and the NLB are aware of it, and they're waiting to get appropriate weather to go in and repair it. As Mr. Scott says, that's not one of our lights. However, I did take the opportunity to inform all the harbour users that the light was out, because a lot of the guys are fishing out that way anyway. So we did carry out a role, an additional role, to inform them through a notice to partners, that the light was out, and the NLB were in hand to repair it when there was suitable weather.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fleming, and thank you for coming along today. I see Councillor Stirrick's arrived, and his hand is up.
Just about the Bellrock, that comes under the auspices of the Northern Lighthouse Board, which are based in Edinburgh, with the museum up in Fraserburgh.
Yeah,
that's a point of info.
Thank you very much. Just as another point of info on your behalf, I had a half-an-hour meeting with the auditor. Well, I'll call it a meeting. Maybe grilling would be a better way of putting it, but I think I must have answered all the questions, because I think we did get a very good audit in the end result. So the things I do as the convener that people don't know about. Okay, so is this report agreed?
Agreed.
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 Okay, so if we move on to number 10, which is another important report for the local members of Forfar. So that's number 10. It's public consultation response support, Castle Street and West High Street, Forfar. Any questions on this one? Councillor McLaren first, and then Councillor Devine.
Yes, thank you, convener. Should this report be agreed, could you give me an approximate date when this would be operational?
I personally can't, but Mr. Scott or Mr. Cochrane might be able to.
Yeah, I can give the standard response to such things, which is actually pretty accurate at the moment. When we have direction to prepare the necessary traffic orders, we're somewhere between 3 and 9 months to have those in place. So we'll be looking to certainly, we wanted to have that in the lower end of that particular cycle. It does require the legal process to be followed. There are resource constraints within roads and transportation as a service, and also with legal and democratic services. So with a fair wind, closer to 3 months. Without that fair wind, we're looking at 6 to 9 months. But as I say, we'll be hopeful that we'll be able to process this as quickly as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that's helpful, Councillor McLaren.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Devine.
Well, I would just hope that it's going to be the lower end. Honestly, this seems to have gone on forever, since before I was a councillor, and that's near enough 9.5 years. So I really hope it's at the lower end. We've had several consultations on this, and I'm delighted to see it coming to a conclusion. But I would have been asking the same question as Councillor McLaren.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? I assume it's more relevant to the Forfar members. I'm aware Councillor Davies not with us today, but I do know he's supportive of this as well. So it's good to see the 4 local members are all in agreement on this. So if there's no further comment, is there comments? Does anybody want to make a comment? Councillor Devine or Councillor McLaren, or have you? No. So if we just move to the recommendations then. Is this report, oh, Councillor McLaren, sorry, did you want to?
Yes, thank you, Convener. Yeah, I fully support all the recommendations in this report. This will be a benefit to the motorists and businesses in Castle Street, and I'm also very pleased to see the disabled parking bay in West High Street. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, if we move to the recommendations now then, is this report agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. So number 11 is the possible exclusion of the public and press. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. So if you can let us know